Welcome to our talk this evening. What I'd like to do is talk to you about basically my own experiences trying to find new purpose in the context of the coronavirus. I was um, for me kind of when the word came down, we all have to stay at home. This was kind of a shock. I had a lot of things on my mind. I had two different sets of house guests in town. I had to figure out what to do with them, and how to get them back to their respective countries, which was a huge challenge. Uh, the Japan and the U.S., in case you were wondering, and so there were a lot of challenges there, and and then I kind of had to reorient myself. So what I want to do is share with you this voyage, and then talk a bit about what personal agility might mean for you. I would like to ask you if I know it's not a requirement, but it's much nicer for me if I can actually see you. So I'd like to invite you to turn on your video. That way I can say cheers at the appropriate moment, or also kind of see if you're still with me or if I'm losing you, because it's the visual feedback is actually very important. So I'd like to encourage you to turn on your videos. Obviously you can stay here if you don't, but it's nicer and more fun if you do. So what I'd like to do is start out with some introductions. We've already gone through the the check-in. So but we still have a couple of things to talk about. First, a couple of words about me. I'm originally from the US. I grew up outside of Washington, DC. Came to Switzerland kind of on vacation and got stuck. And after a couple of years in Switzerland, I discovered agility. Much later, I discovered Scrum. Once I discovered Scrum, I never looked back. I mean, Scrum had this change your life potential, change the way you work. I could just see myself, the impact that I was having on people's lives, and decided that what I wanted to do was be a Scrum trainer. I've been officially recognized by the Scrum Alliance since 2012 as a certified Scrum trainer. I have founded two things that are probably worthy of mentioning. The first is the World Agility Forum. We are celebrating agility, as our companies applying agility to achieve better results for themselves and for their people and for their customers. And the other is the Personal Agility Institute, which is what my co-author and I, Maria, founded to basically spread the word about personal agility. So I guess it's been about 6 weeks that we've been in lockdown. For me, this was kind of one of those bigger shocks. It's not the biggest shock I've ever experienced, but it is kind of this, oh wow, this was a special moment. All of a sudden, we know tomorrow's not going to be the way it was today. For my case, I was finishing up a workshop with Joe Justice on extreme manufacturing, a workshop we've now renamed to Executive-Led Agile Transformation, and it was Friday afternoon. And Joe and his significant other were scheduled to spend a week in Switzerland in the mountains and then continue on to the States, or maybe go back to, well, no, they were scheduled to go to the States, but then the lockdown came. And so we're hearing about, well, the airlines are shutting down and there's quarantines and it's, what's going to happen? And so this is kind of like my, oh my God moment, what are we going to do? So we've already gone through introductions. So this part of the round we can skip. But what I'd like to ask you to do is maybe reflect on what was the first important news event that you can remember that really had an impact on your life. Okay, where you said, oh my God, you're kind of which way is up? For me, the first one I can remember was when President Kennedy was assassinated back in 1963. And I was about 3 years old at the time. And so I don't really remember the context, but I remember very clearly I was watching TV. The announcer said, there's a man with a gun. And my 3-year-old brain said, that's the guy who did it. And I remember that to this day. And I can still remember other things like, what happened when the Challenger exploded, what happened when the Gulf War started. I know where I was and what I was doing. So what I'd like to invite you to do is kind of reflect on that. What is the first important news event that you can remember? What were you doing when it happened? And then have a conversation about what you'd like to learn today. So I'm going to ask everyone to go into breakout rooms. We'll put 4 minutes in the room. So what I'd like to ask you to do, we had the question, what do you want to learn? If you could put those things in the chat, just so I get an idea of the topics that we want to talk about. And then I'm going to call on 2, maybe 3 people. You know, what was the first news event that you can remember, and what were you doing when it happened? So I'm going to go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and I'm going to pick Katerina.
Yep. Let me unmute. So what I was telling Devorah it was the fall of the Soviet Union. I was 9, so I remember being at my grandparents' summer house, which is where we would spend a couple of weeks in the summer, sent by our parents. I remember like reading the newspaper, understanding that it must be quite big because Soviet Union seemed important and there was article upon article, but I also remember me having so many unknown words and then asking my grandparents what they meant and what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you get to call on the next person.
Okay, I would call Ville.
Okay, thank you. Funny with Rush, we both had 9/11 as a memory, and for me the learning I hope is that how to use my and our purposes for coping in such situations together and kind of making the best out of crisis for sustainability. Like also we had a small talk with Russ that how can we turn things to more sustainable in all areas. Thank you.
Okay, and you get to call on the next person, and I'd like to remind the next person, the question is, what was the first news event and what were you doing when it happened?
Well, I invite Breeze.
For me.
Sorry, who did you call?
Me, right? The news, the first news event. I guess from my memory, actually, it's the 1989, the Tiananmen Square. In my memory, like any big one. The question is what happened, right?
What was the event and what were you doing when it happened?
Yeah, what was I doing? I was like 8 years old at that time. I don't remember. I was just playing in the elementary school, and suddenly everything becomes so serious. I think that's got me the attention. Okay, so should I do another round?
One more round, and then we'll move on.
Okay, may I call Oliver?
Sure, thank you. I was just, it's funny. For me, it was also 1989. It was the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I remember I was watching the news on TV with my parents, and I believe I couldn't fully grasp the sheer importance of the event, but I knew this was big. And it was quite fascinating.
Okay, so for me, let's see, we did that part. Yes, okay. So what I want to talk about today, you know, when dramatic things are happening around you, how do you find purpose? How do you kind of reorient yourself in this situation? This picture, I found this picture, I'm pretty sure this was on Unsplash. This was not related to the coronavirus per se, except you'll notice that most of the flights there are canceled. Okay, and so, you know, something.
Are you sharing?
Sorry? Oh, I was supposed to be sharing. Thank you for the reminder. So, how does this look? A little better? Okay, so anyway, so you can see here that most of the flights are canceled, and whatever your plans were the day before, they're not going to happen kind of the way you scheduled it. And so what we'll be doing today, what I want to do is show you how the personal agility system can help you find your way in chaotic times. What we're going to do is I forgot to update this slide. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what is personal agility. We'll talk about how I used it to find my way when the lockdown came here in Switzerland, and then we'll take a look at you know, why you might want to learn the personal agility and personal agility system in non-chaotic times. This part about the break, the timings are off. I missed this as I was preparing, so we're just going to skip that, but we will hang around, or we can hang around for a little bit of networking afterwards. That's all in Sri Lankan time.
Question?
Yes. Yes.
I'm just wondering, is this kind of a coaching system that you are using in your work? Oh, that you
This
have
is what I'm
developed?
going to explain, okay? So first question is exactly what is the personal agility system? Second question is how I used it to find my way through the current chaos. And then, you know, the third is to kind of look a little bit about why you might want to apply it yourself or for your life or in your work. Okay, so let's start here. The basic driver in creating the personal agility system was a very simple recognition. I have too much to do and not enough time to do it. And what I realized is that the problem was actually deeper than that, because the demands on my time are quite unlimited. Lots of people, you know, they don't sync with each other, they don't talk to each other, they just say, I want. On the other hand, there are a certain number of hours in the week. Some of them are reserved for, you know, basic physical functions like eating and sleeping. We can have a conversation as to whether socializing counts in that, you know, flexible time that you can choose to use for productive purposes or not. You know, but basically, you know, we've got about 50 hours a week that we can really use to achieve a, you know, some kind of bigger purpose in our lives, be that for work or for personal reasons, and the rest of it is kind of reserved for, you know, basic needs. And so the question is, what do we do with that time? And more importantly, of the things we could do, which of them do we choose to do? Okay, because you can't do everything. So some things aren't going to get done. And the question is, which ones aren't going to get done? Now, many of us have long-term goals. We say we want to achieve this, or we want to become that, or, you know, we want to do something. We use a navigation metaphor and we call our destination Jamaica. Whatever Jamaica means for you, this is your long-term goal. And the problem is, you know, there are so many things happening that we have to deal with right away. And only a small portion of our time is really useful for for going to our destination, for achieving our long-term goal. Well, if you don't, how do you know where you are? How do you know if you're on progress? How do you know if you're working towards the goal? Okay, and so the problem is, if you don't know where you are, how do you know where you're going? How do you know if you're on track to wherever it is that you're trying to get to? So personal agility at its heart is a coaching framework. It's based around 6 questions. The first question is the most important, not necessarily the easiest to figure out, especially at the beginning, but once you get clarity on this question, deciding how to answer the remaining questions become much easier. First question is, what really matters? And maybe you're familiar with Simon Sinek, who says, start with why. Well, what really matters is kind of an enumeration of the answer. Okay, so because this matters, I'm going to do that. Because this doesn't matter, I'm not going to do it. Okay, and so it gives you a very concrete framework for deciding how to spend your time. Now, the remaining questions are actually for saying, how am I going to use my time? The first thing we do is we say, what did you get done last week? Okay, now, usually we set out to do something and nobody's plan survives the first customer phone call in the morning. So, you know, what you got done is probably different than what you set out to do. But whatever you got done, what we like to do is, first of all, make it visible, okay, because that's telling us where we're coming from, kind of like a breadcrumb trail. And the other thing to do is to celebrate it, because whatever you decided to do, you decided to do it for a reason. The boat hasn't sunk. You still have the possibility to get to your Jamaica. So, you know, celebrate that you're still moving forward, and then look at where you are and say, well, where do I want to go? And the next 2 questions are about triage on what you could do. What could you do this week? Now, many other frameworks, they talk about your to-do list, what you have to do. There is no have to do. There are too many things. You can't do all of them. So there are possibilities. What could you do? Now, of those possibilities, some of them are important. They're going to get you to your Jamaica. Some of them are urgent. They're going to keep your boat from sinking. And some of them are just going to make you happy. And so the question is, which one of those do you want to do this week? Okay, and so that's the 4th question. The 5th question: what can I expect to get done? What do I want to get done? This is like setting your course for the week. And so we call that choose. And so the idea is you celebrate and choose your life. Celebrate what you got done. Choose what you'd like to do moving forward, how you'd like to spend your time. Okay, so the idea is, last week you were somebody, you got some stuff done, that made you who you are today. Next week, you're going to do some other things. Those things are going to help you either achieve your long-term goal or become the person who you want to be. And so the idea is through each celebrate and choose, you get a little bit closer to your long-term goal or a little bit closer to the person who you want to be. Okay, so we use a couple of tools to visualize the answers to this question. One is called the priorities map and the breadcrumb trail. These are the two most important. The priorities map, we start with that first column. That's where you visualize what really matters. This is like an information radiator, kind of reminding you what's important to you. The possibilities column, this is what you could do. In other contexts, this would be called a to-do list, but we consider them possibilities and then we sort them by importance. I make a separate column to highlight things that are urgent. And then, you know, through the celebrate and choose process, you identify, okay, what would I like to get done this week? And maybe some of you are familiar with Kanban or personal Kanban. Basically, between the this week column and the done column, it's essentially personal Kanban, waiting, working, done. Everything the folks say about personal, you know, in personal Kanban is correct. The emphasis, however, in personal agility is a bit different because we have these leading columns, what really matters and the possibilities, to do the triage, to help you figure out what belongs in your this week column. Now, the other thing that we have is the breadcrumb trail. And the breadcrumb trail kind of starts with the done column. And you'll notice how all of the tickets are color-coded. Well, they're color-coded to map back to one of the things that really matters. Okay, and so for instance, if you look closely at my plan for this week and the upcoming possibilities, there are no tickets with green dots. And so you might ask yourself the question, if the green dot is your, you know, if the green dot represents your most important priority, how come you're not doing anything that has a green dot on it? Okay, and notice if you're not doing anything that has green dots on it, how are you going to become the person who you want to be or achieve the things that you want to do? Okay, and so this is why we say personal agility is like a GPS. It helps you understand where you are and where you're going. Okay, and so if we look at what is personal agility, a couple of different ways of looking at it. I like to call it a simple coaching framework. So it's not about moving, it's not about doing the work, and it's not about moving the cards around. It's about the questions that you can ask yourself or that you can ask other people to help you or respectively them become the people who they want to be. We have the navigation metaphor. Where are you? Where you're going? Life is an ocean. It's your boat. You get to set the course. And the whole framework of personal agility is about recognizing where you are and the course that you want to set. The core of it are the 6 powerful questions. There are other questions that you can ask yourself. There's no limit on the questions that you can ask yourself, but we find that these 6 questions are really helpful to set the right course and to get unstuck when you get stuck. We have a weekly event. We call it Celebrate and Choose. You'll notice how it's a little bit different than Scrum. In Scrum, we have review and planning, which has got this kind of what is it? Let's just say there's this concept of accountability and feeling guilty if you don't do exactly what you said you're going to do. In personal agility, celebrate what you got done, choose what you'd like to do. Life is going to be different than what you thought it's going to be, so that's why we only do celebrations. But you know, you still want to get to your Jamaica, so you choose every week moving forward. Now, on top of that, there are a collection of tools and techniques to help you understand either yourself or others. The most important are the priorities map and the breadcrumb trail. We also have a tool called the alignment compass, which kind of helps you visualize and I'll show you how to use that a little bit later in the presentation, which kind of helps you visualize what your course is and if it's where you want to go. The forces map is for long-term strategic planning, that the priorities map is more tactical. And then finally, the stakeholder canvas is well, it's basically an interview template for talking to your stakeholders, but you can also use it as an analysis template to kind of try to put yourself in the heads of your stakeholders and, you know, think through their perspective. Okay. So basically, what I'd like to do is give you a chance to kind of get warmed up with the questions. Okay. So Breeze, what we want to do is go back into the breakout rooms. Okay. 2 questions. What did you do last week? And what did you do last week that you're excited about? Okay, and let's do the same group and let's do another 4 minutes and then 4 minutes plus 1. And again, when you see the second 60-second warning, start writing your answers into the chat. So welcome back, everyone. What I'd like to invite you to do is to put your answers. What did you get done last week? You know, maybe a couple of highlights, and what did you get done that you're excited about last week? What are you excited about? I think I'll call maybe one or two people. Henrik, since you just joined us, why don't you say hello, and what did you get done last week, and what did you get done last week that you're excited about?
I did the first part of my coaching certification training last week. It was really interesting, and it was partially professional, but also personal growth. So that was, yeah, it was good, and quite proud of it.
I'm sorry, what was the training?
Certification for coaching certification.
Ah, okay. Okay. Anyone else? Did anyone find that to be a bit of a powerful question? They say, oh my God, what did I do last week? Okay. For a lot of people, that's a surprisingly difficult question to answer. I have difficulties remembering what I did yesterday. Sometimes I feel like I'm running and charging, and I just kind of go through the activities, and for some reason, they don't quite seem to register in my brain what I did, unless I write them down at the end of the day. Project deliveries, business development activities, evaluating working on partnerships, quality time with my life. I like that one. Long calls with good friends. Formulate personal goals for a potential professional partner. Worked a lot, made bread. I hope it was good bread. Walked in the forest, helped roof the shed in the allotment. Okay, so what we're doing is we're basically creating creating visibility around what you did. Now, if you were doing this with personal agility, each one of those would be a ticket on your priorities map, but it would get a color code mapping it to something that really matters. So let's see how this works. So the idea is personal agility is something like a GPS Navigator. It helps you understand where you are. It helps you understand if you're on course. And if you're off course, it helps you figure out what you need to do to get back on course. Okay, so I'm going to talk now a little bit about how I use the personal agility system to find my way in chaos. So how is life different in a chaotic situation? Now, let's imagine for a moment that you are going shopping for food. Okay, and going to the grocery store is probably something you do more or less every week. And there are some things that you just have to have in stock. So like in the case of my family, that includes apple juice, that includes cat food, that includes oatmeal, that includes milk. Coffee is not allowed to run out, and there are a couple of other things, okay? And that sort of thing you can just do on autopilot. Now, so let's say bread is one of our items, and you get to the shop and it looks like that. Now, normally you would say, well, gee, I really only, I like payas, okay? And so I get payas hell. You get into the shop and what do you see? There's almost nothing there. And oh, by the way, you're in a little mountain village and there was an avalanche. And so the roads are cut off. So is there going to be any bread in there tomorrow? Okay, well, you don't know, okay? And that's the challenge of a chaotic situation is that you just really don't know what things are going to be like the next day. And this is, what makes this challenge is when we get thrown out of our comfort zone, when we're under attack, or when we feel like we're under attack. We get into what my wife calls an activated state. Okay, you're in this fight or flight mode. You're able to react very, very quickly, but you're not able to think very deeply. Okay, and so one of the problems of being in an activated state, I mean, well, the state was biologically was created to keep you alive when you're in danger. The problem is it doesn't help you think through things very, very clearly. Okay, and so you can see this in individuals. Sometimes they're just so excited you can't say anything to them without their jumping. Same thing happens to organizations when everybody's in kind of a panic state and collectively our usual methods of communication don't work. And so one of the first things you need to do when you get in an activated state is first of all be able to recognize that you're in an activated state, and then breathe, calm down, bring yourself out of the activated state. Okay, now in my case, why was I activated that Friday afternoon? Well, there were a lot of questions running through my mind as I'm trying to pay attention to Joe's course. What do we need for emergency supplies? You know, are the supply chains going to hold? Will there be food in the grocery stores come Monday? Oh, I have a course on Monday. What am I going to do about the course? Oh, I should cancel it. Oh, no, wait a minute. Maybe I should just postpone it. Help. What do I do? What about Joe and his significant other? Are they going to go back? Are they going to stay in Switzerland? Are they going to go back to the States? Are we going to have to, you know, are we going to have to, you know, put them up in our basement or something like that? You know, what's going to happen there? So, et cetera. It's, oh, customers, man, what are my customers going to do? What happens next? Okay, and then we got the good question. Oh my God, you know, if the customers, you know, are too busy with existential problems, are they going to be doing training and coaching? You know, one of the things I hate about the bank is they give me a forecast that tells me when my bank account is going to go to zero, which is always much too soon. Okay, so you know, we got all these worries, and for me, the first sign that I should come out of panic mode. I was actually walking by one of the gas stations that's also a grocery store. It's like 9:30 at night. And I looked in there, and I was so impressed with it. I took a picture. What do you see in this shop? Full shelves at the end of the day. Okay, and this was when I started to believe, oh yes, the supply chains are going to continue working. We may all be working from home, you know, but there are people who are out there driving the food supplies. You know, whatever has to happen in order for society to keep ticking, it's not going to end tomorrow. Okay, and so this was already my first calm down. Okay, and about this time, you know, you might be thinking, well, you know, Peter, you invented this personal agility system. You should have a clear concept of where is your Jamaica. Aren't you on course to your Jamaica? Okay, and actually, I realized that I wasn't on course to Jamaica. Okay, and so this is where we have the compass, or the alignment compass. Okay, and this is a way you can visualize what you're working on. Okay, and so in my what really matters column, I've basically got 4 things. The first is personal agility, which back then I had defined rather abstractly as making personal agility a thing. I thought it was cool. I thought other people would find it cool. The next one was to do things for family health and happiness. Priority number 3 was running my business. And priority 4 was, I called it a better world, little things that I do to make the world a better place. And so, you know, if I do anything pro bono, or if I, you know, subscribe to some nonprofit journalism or something like that, I'd put it in this column. Number 8, by the way, is other stuff. This is stuff that you have to do that's kind of, it doesn't really serve anything, but it has to get done anyway, kind of like death and taxes. So what I did is, looking back in, what was it, for December, and then I was very unhappy with the results for December, so I actually worked it back to October, going through my breadcrumb trail. How was I spending my time? And what I did is I counted the tickets. Okay, you know, so this isn't trying to do time accounting. This is just more mind share accounting. You know, how much activity is, you know, how much of my time, how much of my focus is on each of these activities. And what I discovered is that over 50%, more like about 65% of my time, maybe even 70%, I think in December, was focused on running my business. About between 10 and 15% each were on personal agility, which was my number 1 priority, family health and happiness, my number 2 priority, and both of them were getting only slightly more than my number 4 priority. So even though I was saying I want to work on personal agility, what I was doing was running my business. Okay, so is there anything wrong with this picture? Which way is that needle supposed to be pointing? Okay, and I would argue that it should be pointing straight ahead. Okay, that is your top priority. You know, whatever is most important to you, whatever matters the most, should be getting the most attention. Now, we could refine this a bit. This is still this is a little bit experimental still. It's kind of in beta test. You know, the idea is we might say, well, how much was it in compared to how much it should be? Okay, so like family health and happiness is probably not going to get 100% of my time, but on the other hand, it's really important. Okay, and if you don't believe me, ask someone who has bad health about the importance of good health, and you'll see why you want to make sure that those sorts of things do in fact happen, even though they might not get much time. So anyway, I was talking about this with Maria, and Maria says, you know, have you ever actually considered doing personal agility? And my reaction was a bit, yes, well, actually. And So on the basis of this, you know, it's funny. It was a very, very gentle question, but I remember it like a sledgehammer that just knocked me over. And so on the basis of this, I decided to go back to the beginning, back to the beginnings of how you get started with personal agility. And the first question is, why do you want to do personal agility? What is the transformation in yourself or the world or, you know, your company or whatever that you want to achieve? Okay. And I thought about that. And for me, I feel like I want to realize my potential. Okay. There was a personal thing. I was running very, very hard on business, but I never felt like I was making any progress. Okay, so that's interesting. So what does it mean to realize your potential? And this is where I was thinking about actually our first case study, or for our first real case study of personal agility. Someone who'd been doing personal agility for over a year. And Sharon was actually a coachee of Maria's, who I met back in January. And when Sharon met Maria, Sharon was holding down 5 jobs. One of them was working as an Uber. She made just enough money to keep a roof over her head, but not much more than that. And it was really marginal. And in fact, in the US, they do studies, how many people would be challenged to pay an unexpected $400, say a medical bill or something like that. And she would have been severely challenged by a $400 unexpected bill. What she wanted to do was start her catering company. But the problem is all these things in her life were happening. And so Maria got her started with personal agility, and she started making better choices about what to do, and much more importantly, about what not to do. And within a year, she was able to go from just barely getting by to having a solid, comfortable income. And in her second year, she'd actually doubled her income again from the previous year. So she went from earning, 25, maybe 30,000 on a good year to over 100 on her second year. And, that 100 is already guaranteed in her third year. And the thing is, when you look at the studies, there are 100 million people like Sharon in the US, just in the US. And I looked at that and I said, this is what I need to be working on. Okay, whatever else happens, I need to make this happen. Even if I can only reach 1% of the Sharons out there and help them, that's still 1 million people. Okay, and I looked at that and I said, that's the potential of personal agility. This is what I want to focus on realizing. And so for me, once I had the clarity of purpose, everything else fell into place. Okay, so what I did then was I rearranged my priorities map. I said, first of all, running my business is important, yes, but personal agility is a long-term thing. I want to emphasize that. So I made a very clear commitment to emphasize, long-term over short-term. I had some, I'll call them construction sites in my life. That's a German expression, Baustellen, which I needed to clean up. And staying healthy and happy is still a priority. Oh yes, I've still got running my business and I still have to do that, but I've actually pushed it down a notch and made certain that, that my prioritization matches that. So where am I? So what this led me to do was to make new choices about how to spend my time, okay? And so you can see that from the tickets, they're color-coded. LT means long-term over short-term. I've also color-coded it with PA for personal agility. Health and happiness, focus, and notice running my business. Oh, there it is, number 5. So that was my running my business was only showed up as number 5 on my priority list. Deborah, you'd like to ask?
Are we supposed to be seeing this? Are you sharing this, or
I am
visually?
sharing this. You should be able to see it. Can anyone else see it?
I can see the screen. Yeah. So
yeah? Okay.
I don't know what happened to it. I just see our faces. I don't see your screen.
Do you have one screen? And if you you just need to click on the main Zoom screen, and you should see the shared screen.
You may have closed it.
Can happen sometimes. If you try and click back on the Zoom icon, that may actually work.
Maybe Peter, you can stop sharing and start sharing again for
Okay.
Laura.
So we'll stop the share for a moment.
Yeah.
Ah.
And then start again. Maybe you have closed it accidentally. Now it's sharing again.
Oh, thank you.
Yay!
So happy to see it.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And so I'll share these slides on SlideShare. In fact, they're already out there on SlideShare, which I'll share them with you when we get to a break. Okay. So anyway, so what I was able to do is, by getting clear on what my priorities were, and then by prioritizing according to what I really cared about, I completely changed what I was spending my time on. And so instead of saying I care about A and doing B, I actually said I cared about A and I did A. Okay, and I still do some B, and probably moving forward, running my business and personal agility are going to get about equal amounts of space of mind share, because I can't totally ignore running my business. And I do hope that personal agility will start to represent more of my business than it does now. So anyway, so what helped me establishing a new course in life? Now, there was one aspect which I didn't talk about much here, which is exposure to new ideas and openness to the ideas. Getting that right question at the right moment. I mean, that's basically what coaching is about, okay? The compass helped me see what was going wrong. And actually, I developed that as part of this exercise because I needed a way to visualize what the problem was. This clarity on who I wanted to be, and have it, help me move forward. And one of the things I discovered is that when I was clear about what I wanted to do, I could communicate that, and other people reacted, to my own clarity and my own purpose. Okay, and that was true both in the family, and that was also true. Even Maria is now, Maria and I have always been, very committed to this, but you can see the effect of positive energy is also having on her, and now she's more focused on it as well. So what came out of this, for me, coping with chaos, the first thing that I would do is, is to kind of develop the skill to recognize when you're stressed or activated, as my wife would call it. And in this case, you need to learn to breathe. You need to be able to slow yourself down, to bring yourself out of this activated state so you can think clearly. Now, when things are chaotic and you really don't know what the situation is, it's fair to say the first priority is keeping the boat afloat. If the boat sinks, game over, that's generally considered a bad thing. So, first question is, what do I have to do right away? In my case, that was figuring out, helping Joe figure out what the right thing to do is. We ended up suggesting that if there's a plane going to the I think he decided to go back to Japan. If there's a plane going to Japan, he should get on it because there might not be one the next day. And I'm not sure if it was perfect advice, but it wasn't bad advice. And so he flew back to Japan, and that made a number of things easier, both for him and for us. And then, figuring out what is your goal, what is your purpose, who do you want to be? I didn't mention the sixth question, which is who can help, and asking for help and being able to, what makes humans, what makes us a dominant species is that we can collaborate with each other to, achieve larger goals. Okay, so always a good question to ask, who can help? And then I would call this last thing being the captain of your boat. Okay, you're the one who sets the course, know what really matters to you, and then always ask yourself the question, what can I do to get myself a little bit closer to that Jamaica to accomplish whatever it is that really matters to you? Okay, so what I'd like to do is maybe stop and see, do we have any questions about kind of personal agility and how it works? And so I'll take a question or two or three, and then maybe talk about why you might want to learn that yourself or who might want to learn it. So are there any questions now?
Hi, Peter. Bree speaking. So I remember I was, when I first kind of got to know this, and I'm very impressed how you sort of organize the personal agility on a practical level, like the Trello, for example. Would you like to elaborate a little bit, like what actual tools you're using and how you manage your yeah?
Okay. So we have both printed versions and kind of a suggested Trello board for the for doing this electronically. For getting started, I actually like to work with the physical tickets and little sticky dots or colored crayons or something like that to get started. Having said that, I think that a paper board gets to be a bit restrictive, so I actually move it to Trello fairly quickly. The only thing which is tricky with Trello is it's easy to let your board get to be much too big. and then all of a sudden, you've got too many columns, and it's from idea to done just takes forever. And so, one of the things, one of our first success stories, a guy named Walter Stulzer, he said, I want to end each week with satisfaction and start each week with confidence. And the only way I can do that is if the list of possibilities isn't too long. So he was actually very, very restrictive about what he put in his possibilities list. Beyond that, I think the most important thing is to have what we call a celebration partner. Someone with whom you sit together at least once a week, who's going to ask you these questions and kind of make sure that you give yourself honest answers. One of the things that's hard to do or that's easy to do is to kind of, remember I said the difference between personal Kanban and personal agility is personal agility has the triage at the beginning where you think about what really matters and use that to decide how you want to spend your time. But it's very easy to get into the, okay, well, I know what I have to do, I just have to do it mode. And so you kind of get into the spinning the, spinning the hamster wheel mode, okay? And I think that one of the things that a celebration partner should help you do is stay out of the spin the hamster wheel mode. In my case, I've been doing it with Sabina now, with my wife, for about 4 or 5 weeks now, I think. Maybe 3 or, yeah, since the lockdown started. And she was the one who asked me, what did you do last week that you're excited about? Because that kind of focuses you automatically about the stuff that really matters. And I found that to be really helpful. So it doesn't need a lot of tools. You can do it with Trello. But I think having a celebration coach or a celebration partner to do it with is very, very, at least once a week or so, is very helpful. Obviously, you can ask yourself those questions anytime. Okay, personal agility is about the questions, not about the tickets that you're moving to the left or the right.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else before I move forward?
Yes,
Going
Peter.
once? Yes.
I was intrigued by the fact that you split running your business and making personal agility a thing. I was naively assuming that actually it was more kind of at the core of your business, and you then kind of hinted at that it is becoming more of a key.
Right. Well, the thing is, let's say my business has what I'll call a cash cow, to use the marketing term, which is Scrum training. Okay, and that's a mature business. It's well understood. A lot of people know what it is and what they want. You don't really have to educate the market. Although we are kind of in a what's the word? We're going through a very, very competitive phase, kind of a red oceans phase. Where the sharks are kind of attacking each other as much as they're attacking the food. And so so for me, running my business, this is kind of the mechanics of running and organizing classes, and is more focused on Scrum than personal agility. Having said that, what I'm trying to do now is actually do more personal agility workshops and also really support the people who are becoming recognized trainers so that they can teach personal agility. Okay, so I'm trying to move it to the center of my business, but I wouldn't say it's there yet. At some point, as this gets to be more successful, I think the difference between running my business and personal agility is going to decline. And so, like, sometimes I have cards that are tagged with both. So, personal agility is a subject, and long-term over short-term is kind of a strategic direction. And so sometimes personal agility, usually it's tagged as long-term over short-term, but sometimes, like if I'm doing a workshop, it'll get tagged as running my business. Okay, so it can go either way.
Thanks.
Okay. And notice this isn't about perfection in the bookkeeping. This is just about, kind of having the understanding. The important question is, where are you? Where's Jamaica? And is the boat heading towards Jamaica, or are you drifting off towards Antarctica? Antarctica is a much colder place than Jamaica. And so while it may have its attractions for some people, it doesn't happen to be where I want to go. And so I need to make sure that the boat isn't drifting. Okay. What I'd like to do, okay, I'll see. Deborah, did you have a question? Deborah, did you have a question?
Well, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but it seems to me that what's liberating about this is that the destination is including values that are very humanistic, that create, that expand what people define as success, so that they really are allowing things that are fulfilling in terms of health, emotional health, to be part of the success map. But these steps seem just like basic reflection questions, just reorganizing yourself over and over again.
Yeah.
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 Is
I would
correct?
I would totally agree with both of those statements. Okay. And what's interesting is we're starting as we collect our case studies. We got a couple of cases now where people have kind of reconnected with their own humanism, rethought their priorities, and that's just unblocked them so that they have been able to realize their potential. One case, the guy came to me for coaching. He says, you know, I took over this company. You know, we're struggling. You know, I got water up to here. I'm struggling to survive. I'm working 80 hours a week. I've got all these things to do. I have no idea what to do next. Can you help me decide what to do next? And so, you know, we kind of went through the process of creating the priorities map, and you know, all of the things that he listed as priorities really amounted to one thing, which was save the company. And so I said, why don't you make save the company your number one priority? Because that's what this is all about, right? And he said, okay. So he made the ticket, save the company, top left-hand corner in the what really matters column. Then he went off and did it. And he came back 2 weeks later and we kind of talked about what happened. And it was all very, I'm going to say vanilla. You know, we're kind of going through the motions, but nothing really dramatic happened. Just as he walked out the door, he didn't tell me about this until 2 weeks later because he said, you know, we'd already kind of gone over our time. So just as he walked out the door, wait a minute. Yes, I want to save my company, and I want to have a halfway decent life. And he went home and he told his wife, I want to have, you know, yes, I've come to a decision. Yes, I want to save the company. I still want to do that, but I want to have a decent life. And she said, oh, that's very interesting. What does that mean? And he thought for a moment and he says, well, how about we go see a movie tonight? And her reaction was like her eyes almost popped out of her head. She's like, what? You haven't suggested that in over a year. Okay. And so all of a sudden, you know, there was a new balance and he was able to communicate, you know, clearly how things were different. And the people around him understood what that was about. And in this case, I think it was very good for their relationship. It was also good for his company, but because he changed his priorities, he was able to let go of some things that were holding him back. And so he found a way forward, which has allowed his company to serve there. I wouldn't call them thriving, but they're still alive and they're still kicking and they're still, you know, it still looks like they're actually going to deliver the products that they set out to do. So, you know, this kind of, you know, readjusting your priorities. And I got a couple other stories like this. They're not quite so ripe that I can tell them here. You know, but, you know, people who've kind of said, oh, well, you know, maybe spending 95% of my waking hours on the business isn't good for me. And by, you know, getting their life back, they've actually, well, it's the changes that enabled them to get their life back also enabled their teams and their leadership teams to be more effective. And so all of a sudden the companies are taking off as well. So we're starting to see a lot of that where the business side and the human side, they really complement each other much more, I think, than many people, especially many classically trained business people want to admit. So anyway, what I'd like to do is share a couple of stories about what personal agility has done. Walter was one of my customers, and he came to me saying, you know, I've been trying to, you know, basically pass the torch to the next generation of leadership, and they've never been strong enough to hold the torch. I tried for 2 years to get them there, and we weren't having any success. What he didn't tell me at the time is how dramatic the situation was. He basically had about 6 months to make this turnaround happen. Otherwise, there was going to be disaster. And so what we did was he did personal agility, and his company did a very lightweight version of Scrum at the leadership level. You know, personal agility was for him to kind of get clear on what he needed to do. And the Scrum for, you know, for his executive team was to basically give them the responsibility and activate them, so that they activate them in a positive sense, in the sense of energize, not in the sense of panic. You know, so that they could do what needed to be done to get the company on a good basis. And for him, personal agility, being able to focus on what really matters, being able to decide what not to do this week, but also being able to inspect and adapt moving forward was critical. So, within 6 months, he was able to save the company. Within a year, he basically got the situation where everyone knew why they were there and what they were there to achieve. And this year, he's now brought the company into a profitable situation. This was a young man is a young man from Sri Lanka. Very, very talented fellow. Probably a very sharp guy before he discovered personal agility. But his challenge was, he just had so many things on his plate. He had a high workload from his studies. He had a job. He had a elected office or a volunteer office that he had to do, and so his challenge was really allocating his time systematically. And he wanted to be successful at school. He was an honor student, among the top of his class, but he didn't want to be one of those people who only worked. And so he also needed to find this balance and between having a life and being professionally successful. And so he actually made a very conscious choice to make sure that he has enough time for having a life, doing social things, being together with his friends. Oddly enough, it was the social life where he made the connections, which led to him being invited to a national TV format, where he's now a recurring guest, where they're basically providing a format to give a voice to young people in the country. And so for him, this was all about the celebrate and choose, but also being able to lower his stress level, to come out of this activated state, so that even when he had a lot to do, he could think clearly, but he could also take breaks without feeling guilty. Okay, so I could kind of go on and on and on. I think we'll stop here. Although I might ask you the question, would you like to be one of these success cases? Okay, because what we're seeing is that a lot of people are able to make very quickly very dramatic changes in their lives.